Questions?
Is there an agency that specifically protects seniors? I work with two high-risk populations, very, very fragile special needs kids and very, very elderly geriatrics, and many, many geriatric patients have lost lots of money in supplements, and more importantly, their names and addresses were sold to scammers, and a couple have had their bank accounts attacked. And when we try to fight for them, we get roadblocks and say there's really nothing to do to help them through adult protective services. So I don't know where to guide them to now.
So, a specific enforcement agency, I would say probably not, but I think all of the agencies in this area are very sensitive to the fact that the elderly population is a common target, not just for supplement fraud, but for financial fraud and all kinds of things. We try to do specific educational pieces and outreach to groups that work with seniors. And as I said, I think we have tried to make a priority on products like memory-related supplements that are targeted to the elderly and financial scams as well. And I think other agencies are sensitive to that issue also.
So is there one agency, once a scam has occurred, that I could send them to get legal help? Because senior centers and all the others have told us no, there's nowhere for them to go.
Absolutely, you should send them to the FTC's website, have them file a complaint with us. So that would go to us. If there's an issue related to the supplement and product labeling, you certainly could go to FDA, especially if there's an adverse event. But our consumer complaint database goes into Consumer Sentinel, which is shared with agencies all over the country, including the state AGs and local enforcement agencies. So even if it's a scam that may be local, it would still be something that could go through the FTC portal and get picked up by local law enforcement.
I have an interest because of just this same fraudulent activity can actually span the life course. So from special high-risk children with rare diseases to the whole course of the lifespan, to the dementia, Alzheimer population, and companies that specifically target this. Are there any monitoring systems set up or knowledge of like a company that would do this once with one population, then once they're shut down in that venue, moving to another age group or another type of diagnostic venue? And is there any specific tracking besides obviously your legal documents there? Any thought that this continues across the lifespan course?
So when we pursue an enforcement action against a company, we get them under order, and our order will cover anything that a broad range of products and claims going forward. And if they were to violate that order, then they would be subject to very significant penalties. And we do, our enforcement division monitors compliance. One of the reasons when we bring an action against a company, particularly a smaller company, and include the founders or owners of the company, is we want to make sure that exactly what you described doesn't happen, that they don't just pop up somewhere else under a different name. It's really the same people, just with a new company. So we get those individuals under order as well. And we do see recidivists who pop up in multiple fraudulent activities. Kevin Trudeau is an example that comes to mind. He happens to be in jail right now. So, but that is one reason that we will go after individuals involved in the marketing and not just the company.
So FDA, not necessarily within the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, but within the Office of Regulatory Affairs, does monitor for fraudulent activity like that in our arena, and they do address it and deal with those specific firms. I can't speak to their activities specifically, but we do have that type of monitoring within our agency as well.
Maybe I can ask Dr. Swift my same question from before about products that are not sold but are given away in programs that provide services for free. I don't know if you heard my question before, if you were here, but say in a needle exchange program, I saw the Alimidrol, that made me think of it, that is, that gives away, say, herbs and supplements to participants to help them with withdrawal symptoms, or a clinic for low-income women with cancer that gives them products to help with, say, the side effects of chemotherapy. So nobody's being charged for anything. Everything's being given away for free. A lot of the products are donated, but some of them are purchased by these programs. So how does this fit into something when it is not commercial?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think that's actually something that people higher up in my agency would be able to answer. So I'll give you my contact information afterwards, and I can send your question to the appropriate person.
Okay, I'll talk to you later then.
And actually, as you described it in more detail, I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is, if a company is giving free samples to a clinic like that in order to ultimately market to those consumers, and you have concerns about the claims, there could be a commercial element to that. And the other thing is, we look at marketing not just directly to the consumer, but also to healthcare professionals. So, for instance, I have a case now involving an infant formula company, and we're looking at claims that they made not just to mothers, but to pediatricians, healthcare providers, and hospitals about the benefits of their products. So if the company is telling the clinic, this is what our product does, that could be a hook for the FTC. So I would encourage you, if you have specific concerns, to go ahead and report them to the agency.
Thank you.
Is what your groups are doing, is it much of a deterrent enough to prevent some of these cases from happening? I'm just sitting here thinking about a case in our community where a company is marketing such blatant claims about diabetes resolution with very little data to back it up. And it just seems like if your group is out there, how are they able to do, so blatantly make these claims? I feel like is there not enough enforcement, or are the companies just not aware of your actions?
I think that, honestly, it depends on the size of the organization that's performing that particular type of marketing practice. They have to come onto the radar. And if it's at a low level, it's difficult to detect. So if you know of something like that, please reach out and report it. Our website offers our email address, and we have various other addresses and contact information within the agency that can address that question. So if we're not able to detect it, or we haven't detected it yet, that doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't want to address it. If you bring it to our attention, then that's something that we might be able to handle. And our office's email address is odsp@fda.gov, hhs.fda.gov. And please send any instance like that to us, and if it will be addressed, or at least considered. So please don't hesitate.
I would add that if it is a truly local issue, I would encourage you to report it either to the consumer protection people in your state attorney general's office, or the local DA in the community, because candidly, we do focus on national marketing issues because we have to address the cases that are affecting the most consumers, and so we may refer a matter that's more local to local authorities, but I would encourage you to start there. You certainly can file a complaint with the FTC, but realistically, we do have to prioritize. You're absolutely right. There are going to be deceptive marketing claims in the marketplace, no matter how aggressive our enforcement efforts are and no matter how many resources we have. You know, we try to reach out to consumers to make them more aware and savvy about the kinds of things they should be leery of and to help them identify sort of the red flags of deceptive marketing, but it's going to continue to be a problem, no question.
Is there a place we can go to find the scientific evidence the company provide to the consumers? Like, are they forced to provide those research data to the consumers?
No, they're not. They're required to maintain it in-house as substantiation if requested. However, they're not required to provide it to a consumer. And we would typically direct any questions like that for a consumer to contact the manufacturer directly.
Yeah, I would just echo that. There's nothing under FTC law that requires them to show their substantiation. They have to have it in hand before they make the claim. We do, as a law enforcement agency, have the ability to essentially subpoena that information from the company if we bring an investigation, but they're not required to turn that over to consumers. Often companies post their studies on their website because it's a very convincing marketing tool to show their studies on the product, and often that kind of promotion is deceptive because consumers don't understand that a small unblinded uncontrolled study isn't very good evidence, for instance.
Out of 70,000 products or whatever, I mean, how many roughly make it to that winner's circle, being able to make a disease claim with real evidence and present it responsibly? It seems like it would only be a handful.
Well, technically, they're not supposed to be making disease claims, right? And so if they're a dietary supplement, they're not. Maybe I might not have been clear earlier. They're not allowed to make a disease claim. And that's one of the requirements. They're allowed to make a statement about how their product may affect the structure of the body or how the body functions. But when they suggest that their product can actually address a disease state, then that's something that we would have to take action against.
So that's crossing the line, even if they, separate issue that's crossing the line, if they go from structure, function to disease claim.
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Yes.
Are you guys looking at the SARMs issue with the dietary supplement? I know they're being sold as research liquids, but even in the Department of Defense, I know like soldiers, some have tested positive for SARMs. So looking at regulating that at all? Or?
I believe that a different office within FDA has been looking at that issue, and I know the Department of Defense has been addressing that because they get a lot of questions from their members about SARMs products, and they have a list on the site that I mentioned, the Operation Supplement Safety site, and they have a page devoted to SARMs and the safety concerns and legality of products. That is less an issue for us because our issue is there substantiation for efficacy claims and the kind of what is the ingredient, is it legal, is it causing a real serious risk, is really more appropriate for other agencies with that expertise to handle. But I know Department of Defense is very concerned about that issue. It's a discussion that we have interagency between Defense and FDA and Department of Justice, and I know it's a concern.
Could you just define a SARM? Maybe not everybody knows what it stands for.
Does anybody, you want to take that?
Selective androgen receptor modulator.
Thank you very much.
There's a zone that I'm curious about that is that entails clinicians or providers who also then vend a product. And there's this space where a manufacturer would not need to make a claim, but then that claim is sort of made by proxy or implied by proxy by the clinician. I think of, I've encountered people who say get vitamins, supplements, fancy, special magic water from their chiropractor. So given that this isn't a national claim that's made, but it's a claim that's repeatedly made in many different small venues, what space addresses the safety and efficacy of that kind of interaction?
Are you referring to a product that was prescribed by that individual or just suggested by that individual?
Well, either one. I'm just asking for enlightenment about where the dynamic comes, because, I've heard, I'm trying to be vague for obvious reasons, but I've heard individuals who will go to a particular provider, the provider vends the product, and this person manifests as some form of clinician, whatever that is, and then because there isn't a print ad, there isn't a national campaign, but yet there's clearly a message being conveyed. You ingest this stuff and you'll get better.
And so we put out consumer advice for clinicians. We put out advice for clinicians, we put out advice for consumers, and hopefully between that we can kind of tease out some of the issues.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that probably in that situation where you have a clinician who is vending a product, that they are a distributor for a company, and that the company is providing that clinician information about their product, and for that would be where we would potentially focus our efforts, would be on the manufacturer and the literature that they're providing to clinicians or to their distributors. Maybe that's one and the same. Maybe the clinician is a distributor for the company, but that would be marketing. And we probably would focus less on the individual clinicians and more on the manufacturer and the literature or information they're providing to the clinician.
Question up here. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. Is there a question up here? Someone over here had a question, yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of these companies are using contract manufacturers, obviously, to make their product under their name. Have they ever been looked at or taken action against from an actual contract manufacturer who's making the product, putting a label on the product, even though they're not the one selling it? Or is there any responsibility associated with that?
So that falls under the CGMP regulations, and that's actually not something that I can speak to. I'm not as comfortable with CGMP as I am with NDI and other regulations. But I would refer you to information on the website. We have information that's more of an industry type question, where we would have that type of information. Or if you want to find me afterwards, I can give you my contact information and I can direct you to someone who would be able to answer your question.
We saw earlier a figure depicting supplement use increasing with age. So I had a question regarding the baby boomer population. And so I think in the industry, at least, is seeing it as an attractive market right now. I think perceiving them as cash cows. And so, but I for myself see a lot of concerns, being that they have, they're often maybe have other diseases and taking prescription pharmaceutical drugs, and drug interactions with taking cocktails of supplements, as well as being susceptible to scams like phone scams, like that. So I was wondering, the whole panel, I guess, if you foresee this as an actual concern, that there's some preparations to address that.
I would just give the answer that I gave earlier, which is we agree with you that is a population that's targeted, that the issues are serious given what elderly consumers are taking in interactions. And we have made an effort to target a lot of our consumer ed to elderly populations, not just statically on our website, but through teaser sites on the internet, but also going out to groups that work with the elderly in local communities and doing outreach in that way.
And we offer the same type of resource. Unfortunately, our resources are fairly limited in terms of our ability to, as an office, direct outreach. So we offer consumer information on our website, and our communications group does actively offer information and put things out. I think through FDA.gov, they have tweets and texts and what have you. But that's really the extent of our ability to address that. But I agree with Michelle that that is obviously a concern.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up our first session. We're scheduled for lunch now, and we'll meet back here at 1:15. Thank you very much.